Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Inside Fnatic's Brush. Today, we're looking into the second week of the LEC Winter Split. Fnatic started rather strongly this season with a 2-1 entry, and now they're going to be looking to consolidate that good start with potentially a 3-0 week. Starting the week, it's going to be Fnatic versus Rogue. Now, we know Rogue is a bit in an awkward situation, not only with their roster, but with their organization as a whole. So, when it comes to synergizing and working together, they're definitely not the best out there. So, this is one of the opportunities for Fnatic to get in and score an easy point for the split. The draft starts rather interesting as we lock in Galio and Ambessa, looking for a lot of CC combos and just overall crush the enemies by jumping onto them one by one. Now, usually we get a lot of bot lane focus, but with Ambessa, Razor puts a lot of priority on the top lane and helps Oscar get ahead, who's already pretty much managing his lane very well, but just over dominate Adam and make sure he has no value into the game. However, Fnatic will make a couple of mistakes throughout the games, on top of getting really absorbed into Rogue's playstyle, which is very slow and, to be honest, will put you to bed on the long run, which makes it quite difficult when it comes to contesting certain areas of the map or even common objectives like the Voids or even Atakan. Marang's very aggressive early playstyle made it that the mid to bot lane was having a little bit of trouble, and on top of that, a very poor team fight made it that Rogue could get the Atakan into the Baron and just push Fnatic way behind. And thankfully, Fnatic is just better at team fights and just better mechanically overall, which helps them get back into the game at some specific points, but most importantly, all the resources that were given to Oscar early game finally come through as he jumps into the Drake Pit River and cleans up the team fight, which actually leads to the victory for Fnatic. As we say, a win is a win, but this was definitely quite a bit of a messy game. Thankfully, Oscar took his responsibility and put it in his own hands to carry his team over the finishing line. MVP for him on that one for sure. With this game behind us, it was time to focus on the game of the week, the Classico, Fnatic versus G2. Now, this one was definitely one to look forward to, not only because of the rivalry, but also because of G2 being in a poor form, but when they happen to face Fnatic, suddenly they become T1 Prime. Fnatic continued to look into their scaling options and decide to go with a poke composition with Jace, Azir, and Ezreal. Some very good engage options as well with the Maokai and Leona just wraps up this very good draft in my opinion. To summarize the early game, it just sucks to be a top laner. Both BB and Oskarnin get dove over and over again. Even more Oskarnin as he's magically actually winning the 1v1 against BB, who keeps on calling Skumont to bring him some reinforcements and try to be relevant into the game. This really, in the end, doesn't matter much as Caps, I believe, just like Hillisang last week, remembers he's part of Fnatic and starts making the weirdest TP or positioning throughout the map, giving Fnatic an advantage, also with Mickey X making sure that in some cases he's drawing the rest of G2 outside of the rest of the team. The better map plays just allow Fnatic to take over the map and put G2 in a very awkward position as they try to contest Arakan, with the entire poke team just throwing spells at them, and the moment they need to go in, they completely wipe out G2. This was enough to allow the team to snowball and close out the game with a few couple team fights to finish it off. Overall, that was an amazing game by Humanoid, who played his Azir up to a T. Combined with that, the full poke composition, and G2 just couldn't get any closer to Fnatic, especially when it came to contesting objectives. Despite the very weird back and forth early game and both top laner just being isolated, Oscar actually was the one being much more impactful in the team fights. You just look at his damage and a couple of kills in and he was back being the very dominant Jace he knows he can be. 2 games and 2 wins so far, only 1 left to complete the 3-0 week. This time we're looking at BDS, who so far hasn't been too bad since their first week. Continuing with their scaling trend this week, Fnatic decided to draft Smolder in the mid lane. A Kalista for Upset, who we know can be amazing on this champion, and Rumble for Oscarinen. Unfortunately, the early game is a complete disaster, giving away 3 kills from the get-go and making it very complicated for any of the bot lane to have impact going further. With the early lead, the Nidalee just creates a lot of pressure, especially with her spears and her ability to get from one side to the other of the map rather quickly. It will take a very good combination between Razork and Mikyx to start scraping back into the game, but most importantly, Upset on his Kalista, who was absolutely amazing. Specifically around the Atakan teamfight, where he just pushes BDS back onto their side of the map and manages to grab a few kills. Despite that lead, the game is still quite unsure on which side it's going, as Fnatic is still undisciplined at some points of the game. This lack of discipline actually allows BDS to grab the Baron and make a big push into the bot lane. But thankfully, Ice somehow decides to suicide into Fnatic with a flash ult into Humanoid, while Mikyx finds the perfect angle to jump onto BDS and just wombo combo with an Upset that's just throwing and chucking spears all over the place, which helps Fnatic close the game and secure a 3-0 week. Definitely not the most convincing game of the week, but again, a win is a win, and there's a lot to work on, especially in the first week of a new season. Upset is the clear MVP of that series, making a difference on his Kalista and ending the series 13-1-3. Dominance on the champion, which helped Fnatic secure the 3-0 week. To summarize this week, Fnatic was trying a bit more of scaling champions and composition, which obviously can be a bit touch and go when you're trying to manage some of the aggression early game and make sure you don't fall too far back if something goes wrong. In most games this week, Fnatic did fall a little bit behind in the early game, either by poor execution or being a little bit greedy on some moves. Despite all of that, they always managed to come back from either one or a couple of players, which in my opinion is a great showing to see that they're not giving up and they're still able to recover a couple of thousand gold disadvantage. For this week, I've selected Humanoid as my MVP. Now, I know for some of you that can be a little bit shocking, specifically after his first Corki game, but we did have an amazing Azir game on G2 where he basically crushed Caps in lane, thankfully with Mikyx giving a little help during the laning phase, but on top of that, he was completely dominant over G2. While on the other games, he might have been as good or as impressive, he was actually quite impactful on the side lanes and making sure that the enemy team wasn't getting pressure on other side of the map. Always having his TP available, but also scaling either on his Corki or Smolder, on which he was actually pretty good on stacking just in time to get the 2-5 threshold. We've heard a lot about the team improving in communication and improving their map plays, and we've started to see a little bit of that here. However, as we head into the final week, we're playing the big teams at the top of the scoreboard, like KC and GX. The biggest challenge obviously will be against KC, who are showing a much better face so far and a very aggressive playstyle. While GX has faltered against G2, they still have Noah and June, probably one of the best bot lanes that we've seen the beginning of the season, and obviously the former Fnatic players that we still keep in our hearts. Definitely 2 games that we'll be looking forward to, and hopefully Fnatic manage to snatch another victory on top of them. Anyways, that's going to be all for me this week. Thanks again for tuning in. Let me know what you thought about this week's games and your expectations for the final week of the regular split. I've been Matt Scott. Thanks again and see you next week. Bye bye.